Good morning. I know most of you prefer a live and in-person message, and so I offer my gratitude that you will listen to this recorded one. I am currently attending a Body of Nine retreat in Bozeman. We are learning more about the natural numbers and how each of the 9 expressions of humanity see the world. As I contemplated our scripture this week, I admit that I really struggled with it. My experience of this passage has not been the positive one that maybe it could have or should have been. Instead, I see that this scripture has been co-opted. And as one commentator writes, these words have been turned into a weapon with which to bludgeon one's opponents into theological submission. These words are used as a litmus test for Christian faith in myriad conversations and debates within the contemporary church. They are taken by some as the rallying cry of Christian triumphalism, proof positive that Christians have the corner on God and that people of any and all other faiths are condemned. They are seen by others as embarrassingly exclusionary and narrow-minded, and they are pointed as evidence of the problems inherent in asserting Christian faith claims in a pluralistic world. Is that really what the author of the 4th gospel intended? I can't accept that. The life of Jesus reflected in Scripture, and particularly in John's gospel, reminds me over and over again that our God is a God of ever-expanding and ever-reaching love. A love so profound that it calls us not only to love God and ourselves and our neighbors, but to love even our enemies. Who's left out after that? Do not let your hearts be troubled. So often we reduce this to poor disciples, don't be sad. Poor people, it's okay. I'm still with you. As though the disciples are small children in need of a comforting, dismissive pat on the head. Do not let your hearts be troubled. This is no pat on the head. This is an exhortation to strength and perseverance. This is the rallying cry to a newly formed faith community that is finding itself under the pressure of persecution and death. Stand strong. Stand firm and know that the great I Am is with you. I find it almost comical that we would interpret the scripture as an exclusionary passage and use it to state some artificial claim that we as Christians have the only means of accessing God, when it's made clear that the way is not about a destination at all. The gospel writer shows that Thomas misinterprets the way as some marked out path that leads to some unknown physical place. And Peter, having seen all the wondrous works of Jesus and heard all of his words, still wants to see the Father, failing to recognize he already has. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This isn't about exclusionary access to God, but a definition of God and a joyous statement of identity for a particular faith community. God incarnate as Jesus not only walked among them, living as they did, suffering as they did, dying as they did, but showed them a new way of being, a way that allows love to tear down walls, overturn tables, break open hearts, put people before dogmatic rules, and even life over death. This tangible expression of God's self forever changes their relationship to God. God is no longer out there and unknown. God is personal, and they are invited into the dwelling place, their Father's house. This isn't an invitation to heaven, but an intimate relationship with God. And just like the disciples, we are invited into relationship with God through Jesus. Jesus' life is the way, the truth, and the life, the how of our relationship with God. No one comes to the Father except through me. In other words, no one understands God except through relationship with God. Yet we, like the disciples, we just don't get it. And in our naivete, we have, for thousands of years, drawn and redrawn our exclusive boundaries around God. Like jealous teenagers not wanting to share our best friend, we attempt to control God's actions in the world. or at least their narrative. Instead of celebrating this incarnate, tangible expression of God's self and embracing the divine gift and lesson that is Jesus, and using that to engage with others in dialogue and discovery, we close our doors and say, ours is the only way. How different would our world be and our lives be if instead we took this passage as I believe it was intended, a celebration of the distinct experience of a particular faith community, an experience of a particular expression of God's love in the world. If God is truly as boundless and limitless as we claim God to be, the question begs, why are we so easily and quickly convinced that there would be only one way to access God's wisdom? If God is truly the relentless pursuer of our hearts and souls that we claim God to be, why would we presume God only speaks through the teachings of Jesus and not through the myriad of other experiences around this beautiful planet by people who don't even know Jesus? Why do we insist on assuming, like the Pharisees did, that God is bound by simple laws, that our relationship with God would be stagnant and confined to simple rules, instead of a constantly shifting and expanding relationship with all of the creative potential of the one who created it all? Our scriptures tell us that Jesus did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Our scriptures show us how the seed that was planted with the Israelites began to struggle and grow, and through Jesus began to flourish. Jesus tells us that the body broken to bring new life and the blood spilled as promise of a new covenant was for all people. Yet we assume the story ends with the inclusion of the Gentiles, as though somehow, because the religious fathers of old canonized a book, our relationship with God and our experience of God is now confined only to the pages of that book. No room for different expression, no room for new or different experiences, no room for growth, increased understanding, and all-encompassing love. I think one of the greatest disservices that has been done in the world is our use of this scripture to stake claim to God. How arrogant are we that we would think God is only ours? How much do our egos steal from us when they serve to isolate us from all of the expressions and experiences of God in the world? When you're learning about a new person, maybe you're looking to hire somebody, or maybe you're looking for a life partner, do you only trust your own experience of them? Or do you seek out other ways of learning about them? Maybe you talk to their friends. Maybe you talk to people who were hurt by them. Maybe you've talked to their other employers. Maybe you look on social media and see how they relate to others. What kind of messages do they put out in the world? What image are they creating for themselves? And what kind of images are others creating for them? What's the motivation behind those other images? Do they match? Do each of you follow the same master checklist and seek out the same exact proofs of worth and value and integrity as you suss out the relationship's potential? Of course you don't. It's personal, it's intimate, and it's absolutely your own. Why would our relationship with God be any different? Why are we so quick to say there's only one way to learn about God and to relate to God, and worse, that our way is the only way? I'm so grateful it's not. What I do might not work for you. What you do might not work for me, and it clearly doesn't work for a huge percentage of the world, right? How different would our world be if we understood, as our gospel writer seems to, that it's through relationship with God that we know God, and that the relationship we have with God through Christ invites us into further relationship with those whose perspective of God is different than our own. Might there be more about our relationship with God that we could learn through dialogue and relationship with our neighbors, whom we are called to love, by the way. Martin Luther didn't set out to start a new church. Martin Luther said what he thought was wrong with the church that existed, where we missed the mark. But rather than go through the process of breaking apart and stretching and growing and learning and understanding, we just divided. And each time someone suggests that we stretch and grow, we throw up more borders and we divide and fragment further. We have seen what 2,000 years of exclusivity have wrought. Instead of living out Jesus' vision of love for all, we have continued to batten down the hatches and to mark out our way versus their way, and to presume our way is the only way. And we fiercely and violently defend our beliefs as though our God needs our protection? How utterly ridiculous. Look around. How much more do we need to suffer before we begin to understand? How much more division and violent defense of our position do we need to witness and cause before we say enough blood has been shed in the name of my way and my God? How much more death do we need to finally understand that God is calling us, begging us, pleading with us? Please stop. No more. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Not another reason to divide and conquer. I am the way, the truth, and the life. A call to love, not hate. A call to unity, not division. A call to peace, not war. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Stand firm in the face of violence and death. Stand firm in love. Before you move to your prayers today, take a breath together. Close your eyes and imagine the person you love most in the world. Now magnify that love 700 times 7, and you might get a glimpse of the love that our God has for us. How can we not be changed by this? I love you, and I'll see you next week.